STARAS FLONDERANS by Kate Wilhelm. Originally published in Orbit 1 in 1966, an anthology edited by the author's husband, fellow science fiction author Damon Knight. Republished in two more anthologies, a German one in 1972 and Rediscovery, Science Fiction by Women, 1964 through 1968 in 2024, and in one magazine, Nova Science Fiction 2 in 1982. It also appeared in a collection of the author's stories called Kate Wilhelm in Orbit, Volume 1 in 2015. For anyone new to Wilhelm's work, please don't conclude from that introduction her name is only known for appearing in her husband's anthologies, as she is a 5-time Nebula Award winner. Read by Darrell T. Smith II from my channel Quasar Spectra. STARAS FLONDERANS. The great ship had picked up an uneven coating of space debris. Her once silver sides were scabrous, with the detritus of ancient collisions and explosions, planetary, stellar, galactic rubble that had been hurled out from high-velocity impacts, or from the even more furious paroxysms of novas and supernovas to hurtle through space until the minute gravitational field of the ship netted speeding dust motes and drew them to her sides. A gaping rent on one side of her and many dents and scars told of blind passage through the littered reaches. The ship was spinning erratically, not on her own axis to give interior gravity, but with a lopsided over-her-left-shoulder tumble. There was still enough silver left for her to reflect some of the starlight when the patrol boat first sighted her visually. She had been a blip on the scanner a long time before she was close enough to view on the screen. The three men watching her were silent while she tumbled twice. They were satisfied that she was the dead ship they were after. A luxury liner had first spotted her. The captain had made no attempt to board, but had plotted her course and filed a report. "She's right on schedule," Conley said. His voice was harsh and abrupt. He was big, more than 6 feet tall, 200 pounds or more, with bold features, a too large nose, square, thrusting chin, ears that stood away from his shaved head, a high, heavy forehead, and wide gray eyes that gave him a false look of feline cruelty. He was in command of the fleet scout craft. As Conley turned from the screen, Malco, the second man watching, whistled softly between his teeth. Shorter than Conley, he was more massive, with a great, heavily muscled chest, bulging biceps and leg muscles, spatulate fingers. His legs, arms, and chest were covered with black, curly hair. He had a curling beard and heavy black eyebrows. His eyes were dark blue. There were many crinkled lines of laughter on his face, about his eyes. The third man was not a human. He was Stein, the Claeson observer. He also turned from the screen and watched Conley take his place before the controls. Stein was much shorter than either of his companions, although if he chose to, he could elongate himself to their height. Stein drew his mantle closer about his body and flowed toward his own couch. He was shaped like an inverted tulip when he gathered his mantle about him. The mantle looked like dark gray leather. Under it, his body parts were soft and pink. His brain was encased in more leathery covering, as were his tentacles. His eyes were close to his body now, but they could extend. The eyeballs had transparent protectors over them. His upper half served as a sense organ, like an ear, with the inner parts complex mazes of tubes, membranes, chambers. The organ allowed him to feel vibrations well above and below the human range of hearing. Stein knew that his human companions were considered handsome among their own kind. He was beautiful in the eyes of his people. When he got to his couch, he flowed up onto it, then let himself settle down to a slightly raised mound of leather. He sealed the mantle. "Ready?" Conley asked. They would accelerate to approach the derelict, lock onto her, and investigate from her stem to her stern. Malco grunted, and Stein said, "Let's go." Under his mantle there was a small two-way radio that had been modified so that it amplified his chest vibrations and translated them into sounds that were intelligible to the humans. Conley brought the small scout closer to the great ship, matching her speed until they were side by side. The slow tumble of the crippled ship caused her to wobble as she turned over. She had passed through a region of heavy dust and rocks. The damage done to her was extensive, with several holes in the forward section where the engine room and controls were located. Conley cursed harshly. Malco grunted, glanced at Stein, and said, "Lifeboat pods are empty. She's abandoned, all right." "They left her on manual," Conley said. "If she'd been on automatic, the computer would have dodged all that junk. She must be hotter than hell." He began the approach maneuver, guiding the scout toward the rear of the big ship, away from the engine section and the radioactivity. Malco and Conley made a good team. Stein felt wave after wave of worry come from Malco, while Conley sent nothing during the difficult approach. It took skillful handling to bring the small boat to the right place, but he edged in, first a foot at a time, then inch by inch until it seemed they could reach out and touch the other ship. Stein watched with admiration as the ship started to come nearer them, her tumbling motion completing the maneuver. Conley adjusted the controls, lifting the scout slightly, and when the two met, the jar was so slight that it might have been imagined rather than felt. "That's that," Conley said, locking the scout in place magnetically. "Let's eat first, then board her and see what's what." While the two humans prepared and ate their rations, Stein turned from them to gaze out the port. Unlike species, most often preferred not to watch one another partake of food or perform other bodily functions. He knew his mouth parts were disgusting to the humans. Under his mantle, his tentacles fed capsules into the pink mouth parts that moved rhythmically, and he stared with delight at the unwinding scene passing before his eyes. The tumble of the ship that they now shared seemed gone. All motion had been imparted to the stars about them, but it was a curious motion. It was as if a black velvet cloth were being carried past him, making a slow twist, then settling very slowly downward. It was all very unhurried and leisurely. It was a new way of looking at space. His people had known space for thousands of years, so long that they no longer regarded it as a thing to be conquered. They were almost as much at home in space as they were on the surface of their worlds or in the depths of their oceans. Evolution, in fashioning their mantles, had adapted them to any environment, even for short lengths of time, to a vacuum. Because they always adapted themselves rather than their surroundings, and because of their generosity and open goodwill, they were much loved by the various races of the galaxy. When the Flonderans had come to Claeson, they had been greeted with friendliness and amusement, so eager, so impulsive, so childlike. The name Earthmen was rarely used for them. They remained the Flonderans, the children. It amused Stein to think that when they had still been huddling in caves, more animal than man, his people already had mapped the galaxy. When they had been floundering with sails on rough seas, engrossed in mapping their small world, his people already had populated hundreds of planets, light years away from one another. When the Flonderans had burst on the galactic scene, enthusiastic, vocal, boisterous even, they had been welcomed as children, suspicious, prepared for rejection, for animosity, warfare. They had been met with patience and love. The Claesons loved the little Flonderans. The Claesons pitied the intelligent, short-lived Flonderans who had neither the longevity to learn from and enjoy what they found, nor the collective cooperation of a colonial organism that could ultimately share fully every experience felt by any part of itself. It was doubly amusing to consider that the mathematicians and philosophers had proved that a race so short-lived, so individually contained as the race of Flonderans could not possibly have been viable, and being viable could not possibly have advanced to the degree of intelligence that permitted space travel. Blithely the Flonderans pushed on and out, oblivious to the dangers of space, to the improbability of their being in space. They went wearing guns, but they seldom had occasion to use them. This sector of the galaxy was peaceful, had been peaceful for thousands of years. "Stein," Malco said suddenly, "haven't your people ever come across a derelict like this?" "Not just like this," Stein said. "Not just left empty. There have been ships with plague, accidents, other life aboard, but not one where they simply left it." "This is the second for us," Conley said. "This is how they found the first one. Lifeboats gone, ship damaged by space after the crew left." His voice sounded brutal. "Stein, why don't you stay here? This is our problem." Stein was not made for smiling, and they could not feel the sympathy he was sending. He said, "Your problems are our problems now, Conley." Affection waves washed over him, and his pink parts under the mantle glowed red with pleasure. Malco made a deep throat noise that was untranslatable. "Stay with us, you hear? Between us. We don't know what we might find in there, you understand?" Stein understood. They wanted to protect him. He quivered with pride and happiness. He said, "I am under your orders, whatever you say." "Okay," Conley said. "We suit up and go in through the airlock. We'll have to put the rad suits on. Some of the ship's hotter than hell." He looked doubtfully at Stein. It made them uneasy that the Claessons needed no spacesuits. "Will you know when you should get the hell out?" "I'll know," Stein said, his voice gentle through the apparatus that sent the sound to the two men. While they suited up, he thought of the comparative lifetimes of the two species. He had been fully adult when Rome was building an empire, and now, thousands of years later, the Flonderans, who could expect to die in what was to him a flicker of a tentacle, were being solicitous of him. They were born, matured, died in less time than it took for his world to make one swing around its sun. Malco called him. They were ready. They left the scout and floated along the big ship's hull toward the airlock. Conley was familiar with her design, and he led them through the outer door to the first of three chambers. The outermost one had been damaged, but the other two were functioning perfectly, and the radiation from space dropped to normal by the time they had gone through the last. The ship was a standard transport passenger model, discontinued 70 years ago. The emphasis had been on transport with this model. The corridor was narrow and closely lined with oval doors, some of them open to show cramped sleeping quarters, 3 hammocks to a cubicle. In some rooms, television screens were uncovered, as if the watchers had only stepped out for a beer. Papers on a tabletop drew Conley, an unfinished letter to a girlfriend. In the mess hall, the tables were set, waiting for the crew. The feeling of overcrowding persisted. The tumble of the ship caused a slight pull of centrifugal force so that the men were constantly shifting their positions, now having one of the door-lined walls down, now the floor, then the ceiling. They went in single file with Stein between them. Conley led them through the ship, corridor after corridor of the oval doors, upstairs when they found that the elevators were not working, more corridors. Everything they saw appeared in perfect order, neat and clean, except for 1 or 2 places near portholes where Malco picked up a chess piece and a plasti book. Only where meteorites had struck and entered, some lodging, some passing through and out again, was there actual disorder. Finally, they approached the control room. Conley's radiation detection unit clicked angrily. "Malco, keep watch. I'll go in," he said. "And I," Stein said. He could not see either of their faces, but they were sending washes of courage and bewilderment. He wished he had hands with which to pat and soothe them. He caught a wave of regret from Malco, who pushed himself backward to hang, drifting gently away from the hot area of the door. Conley motioned to Stein to follow and pass through the doorway into the control room. Stein could feel the radiation like a warm yellow sun against his mantle. Presently there was a change in the makeup of the covering, and he could no longer feel anything through it. "What the—" Conley muttered. A fire had raged through the control room. Black dust dotted the space they moved through, the flakes stirring when they were touched. Conley studied the control panel that was left, cursing under his breath. "Like I thought," he said. "The sons of bitches didn't even set it on automatic, just walked away from it. None of the safety's operative. Damn fools. Explains the radiation in here." Stein floated from him toward the next door that led into a safety corridor surrounding the engine room. He was stopped by another flow of radiation. The change in his mantle was longer in coming this time, the feeling of sun warmth stronger. Conley followed him. "No," Stein said. "It is too hot even for the suit." Conley worked a panel back from the wall, and they both looked through the thick window that had been bared, through the corridor and into the engine room. A large meteorite lay in the corridor, lodged between the two walls. Smaller ones had hit in the engine room. The ship turned, and one of the rocks slid from its resting place, moving very slowly to stop against the ruined machinery of the engines. Stein felt a flare of warmth as it hit. He touched Conley gently with his rippling mantle, and they backed away from the window together. 3 days later, after their 5th trip inside the ship, as Stein relaxed in his special cubicle, where a 5% saline ammonia mist played over his mantle, he listened to Conley and Malco talking. "You can put it together," Conley said. "Something happened and they left, just ran out, leaving everything exactly as they were using it. No safeties on, no automatic controls, nothing. The ship was empty when the meteorite hit the engine. The alarm systems went off, but no one was there to do anything. It's still in alert condition. Another meteorite knocked out the controls for it, shorted the wiring, and caused the fire in the control room." Stein sighed. A layer of his mantle sloughed off and was flushed away. He turned off the mist then and joined the Flonderans. He felt very well and healthy. His mantle was shiny black now. "You okay?" Conley asked. He was standing at the port. He turned when Stein came in, and at Stein's affirmative ripple of his mantle he again directed bitter eyes towards space, as if hoping to see the answer there. Why? Why would the captain order the ship abandoned? Did he order it even? Not a sign of attack, no weapon out. "Captain of the entire crew?" Stein said. Conley shrugged again. "They would have put up resistance. You've read our psychology books and our histories. You've been out on 5 recon missions with Malco and me. Do you think Earthmen are cowards?" Stein knew they were not. Fear, if present, would beat against him like a storm tide on an open shore. No such waves emanated from them. "If they'd been threatened, they would have fought," Malco said. "If they had to outrun something, why the lifeboats? Why not the ship itself? There was nothing wrong with it. Nothing. All that damage was done after they left, because they left." Conley returned to his contour seat, kicked it, and then let himself drop to it. He stared at the control panel and said heavily, "Let's give her one more going over, then we turn back." Malco grunted. His fingers combed through his beard abstractedly. Stein could feel their disappointment and restlessness. Like children, he thought again. If they could not have the answer, they did not want the question. Unlike his people, who loved paradoxes and puzzles for their own sake, the Flonderans merely grew annoyed with unanswered questions. It was because of their short lives, he decided. They knew they could not afford the thousands of years it sometimes took to find the answers. "How many small craft were aboard the mother ship?" he asked. Conley shifted to stare at him. His voice was a snarl when he said, "We should have thought of that. They took every lifeboat, scout, landing craft, everything. There were 18 to 20 lifeboats and half a dozen other miscellaneous craft aboard. They knew they couldn't last more than 4 days in the landing craft, even the repair boats," Malco said. "They're gone. 6 hours, 8 at the most in space in one of those." Stein looked at the hairy man and felt waves of dread coming from him. 6 to 8 hours in space, then death from anoxia. He shuddered inside his mantle. Brusquely, Conley said, "Okay, let's get back. This time we split up and go through the private quarters. Try to find a note, a scrap of paper, a scrawl on the wall, anything that might give us a clue. Stein?" "I, too, can search," Stein said. Alone inside the great ship, Stein let himself go, let it come to him. Hanging in a corridor lined with the oval doors, he thought of nothing, not even the sensations he received. He looked like a black shadow, unanchored to reality as he hung there, shiny black, slowly changing to a duller shade as his mantle adapted to the radiation. From a distance he felt echoes of doubts and apprehensions. Malco's waves. From another direction came fainter wafts of determination mixed with the same doubts and perhaps even a touch of fear, formless and unnamed as yet. For a brief time he was one with the ship, unguided, unmanned, alone in space on a course that would take it beyond the galaxy to the nothingness that lay between the oases of life. He shuddered with the ship, feeling the vibrations of the metal under impacts from meteorites, sharp-edged bits of metallic ores set loose in space to roam forever until captured or destroyed. He felt the weight of the galaxy resting on himself as bits and pieces of space debris hit the ship and clung, giving it added mass. He knew that one day there would be enough mass so that the planetoids could be captured, and under the pressure the ship at the core would be crushed and finally molten. It would sweep the path of its trajectory, and its gravitational field would reach out farther and farther, insatiably then, and in 1,000,000 years, or 1,000 million, it would be caught by a hungry sun. Resisting for a while the end of its freedom in space, it would refuse a stable orbit, but in time it would become a captive like all planets. Stein wondered if it would give birth to creatures who would pose questions of cosmology, wondering at the Earth below them, at its origin, its eventual death. Stein continued to hang in the corridor, and now sensations too faint to be identified drifted into him. The temptation to strain to receive them better was great, but he resisted. It would be like straining too hard to hear a whisper only barely within hearing range. One either heard it or did not. He let the feelings enter him without trying to sort them. Emotions had been expressed with every footstep, with every grasp of a door handle, every yank on a drawer, with every shout and curse uttered by the men preparing to abandon the ship. The ship had vibrated with a different tempo of the emotions, and some of the vibrations still echoed along the molecules. Stein intercepted them with his body, and after a long time without movement, he stirred, his mantle rippling slightly as he shifted his position. A great sadness filled him because he knew the answer he had found could not be accepted by the Flonderans. In the madness of fear, the crew had left the ship. What or whom had they feared to the point of insanity? Stein pondered that as he started to investigate the rooms assigned to him. He expected to find nothing, but his search was methodical. He had offered to help to the best of his ability and would do so. He found nothing in any of the rooms he searched. Now and again a stronger wave of the same crawling, irrational fear bathed him when he opened a door that had been closed since the ship was abandoned, but there was nothing to indicate its source. Malco and Conley were depressed and irritable when they returned to the Scout. Stein soaked in his mist of salt, ammonia, and water blissfully, while the Flonderans unsuited and decontaminated their suits. The three gathered in the cabin afterward. "I'm going to call it a bust," Conley said, running his hand over his shaved head. He looked tired and dejected. Malco simply nodded. Scowl lines cut into his dark face, and his deep eyes were shadowed. "Read about ocean ships being found like that," he said. "It looked like everyone just quit whatever he was doing and jumped over the side. No explanation ever given, far as I know." "We'll make our independent reports as usual, then," Conley said. He looked at Stein. "Will you add whatever impressions you got from her?" Stein agreed. He gazed from the port at the ship, an unsteady pad beneath the small Scout. She would sail on, not worth salvaging, keeping her wobbling course toward the rim of the galaxy, and her mystery would go with her beyond recall. 2 days later, the Scout was streaking back toward her port when a blip appeared on the scanner screen. Malco, at the controls, decelerated, and he and Conley watched the ship. "Shouldn't be one of ours," Conley said. "This is a hell of a long way off course for any place we'd want to go." He kept his eyes on the growing blob of light on the screen. The object was almost close enough now for a visual sighting. "How about your people, Stein? Any reason for them to man a ship and come out here?" Stein wriggled his tentacles with excitement. "It must be the regular visit of the Thosars," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I was a boy during their last visit. They come bringing news of the galaxy, exchanging new ideas. They make a regular sweep of the galaxy every 12,000 of your years." Malco and Conley stared at him. Neither had seen him so excited before. His mantle rippled uncontrollably, and his tentacles were a blur of rosy motion. "And they're friendly?" Conley asked. A grin broke out on his face even as he asked. Stein's pleasure was so undisguised that to imagine the Thosars as other than friendly was ridiculous. Throughout the next hours, the ship drew nearer to them, changing on the screen from a blob of light to a pale blue, wheel-shaped ship that was bigger than anything yet made by the Flonderans. Stein radiated such joy and happiness at the approaching visit that the Flonderans echoed it, and the small Scout fairly hummed with the vibrations. Conley and Malco gaped at the size of the wheel. It had a diameter of 7 miles. They demanded Stein tell them everything he could about the Thosars. "Just like you, like Flonderans, only bigger, much bigger," Stein said happily, staring at the wheel rolling through space toward them. "When they come, they visit everyone simultaneously. They have so many ambassadors. Every city, every hamlet, all receive them together. There is a festival, a party that lasts until they depart once more. Their scientists and ours share future dreams. They share discoveries concerning space, as we do with them." He couldn't continue. Silence fell within the small craft. The blue wheel drew closer, occulting star after star with its approach. Conley returned to his contour seat and watched the radar. "They're going to smash us," he said nervously. "It fills the sky," Stein said joyously. "A blue ring in the sky, and then the force fields like silver balls." "It's stopped now," Conley said, cutting in. He adjusted a dial. 2 miles away. An opening appeared in the nearest rim of the wheel, and 3 silver globes glided away from it. "When they get closer, you can see inside them," Stein said. "They can't board us, you know. Too big. They'll pull abreast, invite us to enter their ship." He wished the 2 men could share his happiness, could partake of the ecstasy that was rippling his mantle. To be a passenger in the legendary blue wheel of the Thosars. The globes drew closer, dancing through space, circling one another, bounding apart, leapfrogging. Soon they would be close enough for the Thosars within them to be seen. Stein did not breathe during the last seconds. Even his vibrations stopped. He saw them first. They were signaling. Conley's voice jarred him. "They're only 75 feet away." "It's as I said," Stein cried. "They wish to take us aboard. Let us return to Claeson with them. Conley, blink our lights." One of the Thosars, clearly visible now behind the screen of energy, reached out and touched the scout. It turned. Another of them swam slowly past the port. He was as long as the three-man scout craft. His pale golden body glowed. The magnificent center eye studied them benignly. The great mouth curved in a welcoming smile. He arched away and back again as a great fish turns in water lazily without effort. His face pressed against the port, filling it, too large for it. Stein turned triumphantly toward Malco at his side. "See? Just like you, only by—" He stopped, racked with pain. There was insane horror on Malco's dark face. His eyes were bulging, his mouth partially open. Stein was hit by slamming, staggering waves of terror, such as he never had felt before. He cried out under it, but his cry was not heard. Malco screamed hoarsely, and before he could get to his contour seat, before Stein knew what was happening, the scout shot forward with a brutal acceleration. Malco crashed to the floor. Stein fell also and writhed in pain, his own and Malco's. Malco had hit his head against the metal floor and was unconscious, but his brain was sending out urgent pain messages. The pain waves were on a level apart from the mounting, smothering, thundering waves of fear. The G's increased and Conley lost consciousness. The paralyzing waves of fear diminished. Still, the scout accelerated. Stein knew they would be killed by the continuing acceleration. Whimpering softly, he started to pull himself across the floor to the control panel. His body had flattened to a 6-inch mound, and moving was agony. As he passed Malco, he saw blood trickling from his nose and mouth. Stein was leaving a trail of blood behind him. There had been no time to prepare for the sudden acceleration. Small ruptures had opened before he could adjust. He blanked out all of his thoughts then, except the one guiding him to the control panel. He got to his own seat and was unable to crawl up into it. Conley was stretched out, his face smashed-looking, bleeding. Slowly, Stein dragged himself up Conley's legs until he could reach the controls. He decelerated. Moments later, Conley awakened. The fear came back, stronger than ever. Conley hissed something at him and tried to push him aside. Stein floated over the control panel, blocking Conley's attempt to accelerate again. "I'll kill you," Conley said, hoarsely, sobbing the words. He was oblivious of the blood streaming freely from his nose, seemed unaware of the pain in his chest and stomach when he moved. Stein felt it more strongly than he did. He lunged at Stein, who flowed away from the clutching fingers. On the floor, Malco stirred. Before he opened his eyes, he started to scream. Conley lurched across the scout and grabbed suits from the storage compartment. He let one of them drop on Malco and started to climb into the other one. Malco, sobbing violently, both with pain and fear, began pulling the suit over his legs. He was shaking so hard that his feet missed the openings several times. Stein did not know how either man could move after the ordeal their bodies had undergone. He dared not open the blanking inhibitions he had imposed on his own body. Conley was almost finished when his hand closed on the short-nosed laser gun all Flonderans wore when they went out in space. He stared at it wildly, saw Stein and fired, screaming obscenities at him. Stein sealed off the injured part and dropped to the floor. He tried to speak to them, but could not. His voice box had been destroyed when he was flattened by the acceleration. He was shuddering uncontrollably. He tried to blank out the fear waves and failed. He gathered his mantle about him and sealed himself within it, then waited. The Flonderans had both gone mad, beyond reach. All he could do was wait. He thought of the thousands of eggs he still retained. Carefully, not attracting the attention of the madmen, he deposited them on the underside of the contour seat. Neither man spoke, but occasionally one or the other made an animal noise deep in his chest. The noises filled Stein with dread. Their actions were wholly automatic as they fumbled with the suits, driven by their glands and not their brains now. Before Conley pulled on his helmet and face mask, his eyes swept the cabin. They were animal eyes, maddened by fear, all traces of the rational submerged. The crazed eyes saw Stein, and Conley's hand groped for the gun. He had dropped it. He snarled and started to cross the cabin toward Stein. The fear waves crashed against Stein. Malco was reaching for his laser. They would kill him, maybe destroy the eggs on the bottom of the seat. Stein moved toward the airlock. Malco's hand dropped away from the gun. Both men yanked their helmets in place and stumbled to the airlock. Malco opened the outer hatch. He held Stein's mantle with his hand and jumped, pulling Stein after him. Stein caught a brief glimpse of the other human tumbling alone in space. Then he was gone. The scout flashed away from them like the great silver ship, streaking away toward the black that lay between the galaxies. Stein felt the radiation from space like a warm sun on his mantle. Then it was gone as he made the necessary adjustment. Malco held him several minutes before he released his hold and, firing his belt rockets, left Stein. For a long time, Stein drifted without thought. He caught no glimpse of the Thosars or their pale blue ship, nor of the scout. He did not expect to catch a glimpse of either of the two men. Scattered, he thought, in 3 different directions, the little boat in the 4th. He rested and thought alternately until he knew what the missing bits and pieces were. He was not built for smiling, but if he had been, his smile would have been sad and understanding. He recalled the psychology books of the Flonderans, so full of categorical statements, so certain of the rightness of the theories that guided them in their daily lives. It was said in those books that Earthmen had no innate response mechanisms. Stein fluttered his tentacles under the mantle that was slowly turning dull. He felt very stupid. He should have guessed at the start. He recalled the text and the experiments with chickens raised for many generations with no exposure to chicken hawks, only to have the 10th generation or the 15th generation react with the same blind panic when exposed to the bird as its distant ancestors had. Had anyone ever tried them after 480 generations? That was how many had passed since the last visit of the Thosars to the poor Flonderans huddling in their caves, panicked to insanity by the giants descending from the sky, panicking, scattering. The Thosars would not have pursued them, naturally. They were far too civilized to give chase, to intrude where they were not welcomed. They would have departed, hoping for a more advanced civilization on their next visit. Probably they were quite bewildered by the swift departure of the ships encountered in space during the past 2 years. But again, they would not have given chase. It was not their way. They would hope to contact the government. Stein closed off the outer parts of himself until there was only a spark of intelligence left, and eyes to see with, and he drifted in space, now and again shuddering from an impact with a grain-like bit of space debris. Eventually the eyes were covered with the detritus of space, and there was only the spark of intelligence. It amused him to think that one day, 1,000,000 years or 1,000,000,000 years in the future, he might be in the heart of a planet. There were no regrets in the thought. He had lived many thousands of years. This was one more great adventure. For long periods of time his mind dwelled on the fate of the eggs he had left in the Scout. They would survive. Practically indestructible. They would lie dormant until conditions were right. Then they would ripen and swell with life, and his seed would do what his people had not done, inhabit another galaxy. He let his mind go out to the Flonderans and their crowded world where the Thosars probably already had landed. Eventually, the Thosars would relate the incident to the Claesons, and eventually they would arrive at the answer to the question. Eventually, they would decondition the Flonderans, if there were any remaining by then. Staras Flonderans, he thought. Poor, short-lived Earthmen. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.